course. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, yeah, he's coming just now in a second.
Okay, no problem.
Edwin, maybe you could tell him to rename.
Yes, actually, I would love to do this renaming for him.
So,
yes.
Hi.
Hi, Honorable Salia. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks. Good. We are good to go. Thanks everybody for joining us. On behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, I would want to say that this has not been easy in getting Waheshimiwas together, but eventually it has turned out to be fruitful. Thanks to you and thanks for giving us the time. We shared a bit of the issues that we were to discuss today, and they were to revolve around democracy, taking stock of the gains and losses in Kenya in respect to the democracy and the space that we tend to enjoy at the moment. I would want to say that CAS has been at the forefront in terms of advocating and championing for democracy in the country. We've been here for the last 40 plus years, and we are glad that we continue to work with the different parties and the different leaders that are also here represented in this meeting. So it's a pleasure again. And we, as a foundation, we work to ensure that we build this cooperation, and we work to ensure that be it in Kenya, be it in Germany, that we can always, exchange ideas and learn from each other and try to do what we do best. So it's a pleasure to have you here today. I would want to, of course, take this, baton back to Maureen, so that Maureen then could be able to pick up the discussion and also invite, the guest speaker, and then we see how we move on. As we again move, around with this discussion, I would want to ask our viewers, if you have any questions on Facebook, feel free to ask these questions, and we'll, as we go on, try to ask our panelists to, answer some of them. If you're on Zoom, also there is the Q&A. Feel free. There is the chat button. If you have any questions that you think you'd want to share with us, also feel free to, log in and share your comments. We will try to answer as many as we can possibly, do. So back to you, Maureen, please.
Thank you so much, Edwin, from CAS. We thank you for the opportunity to be able to discuss the topic of democratic gains vis-a-vis losses in Kenya in light of the International Day of Democracy. And I'm pleased to be joined by an able panel. My name is Maureen Wanyonyi. I currently work as a young professional at the Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis. And my panel is composed of a guest speaker, His Excellency, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, former Vice President, former Deputy President, former Vice President, former Deputy Prime Minister, and the party leader of ANC. I'm also pleased to be joined by the panel, in the panel by Edwin Sifuna, Vice Chair CMD Kenya, an advocate, and also the Secretary General for ODM Party. We are also pleased to have Honorable Gladys Bosholei, who is the woman member of parliament in Uasin Gishu and also an advocate. We are also pleased to be joined by Tom Boya, who is a political scientist and also a lecturer at the Maseno University. The discussion is going to help us to break down how Kenya so far is doing with regards to our democracy and how we should do better as part of the recommendations towards making this country better. So we'll start off with our guest speaker, His Excellency Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, who will then just give us opening remarks, and then we will proceed with the program as it should. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Madam. And may I also pass my regards to the other panelists. I've not met some of them for quite a while, but it's good that we can share this opportunity together. I think I would really want to have a more interactive session over this issue. So I'll try to refrain myself from purporting to give a lecture on where we stand today insofar as the gains and losses in democracy are for us as Kenyans today. Because at the end of the day, what we want to see Kenyans benefit from are the actual fruits of democracy, and not necessarily talking about the state of democracy in our country. So we have come a long way. Nobody should underrate the achievements that Kenya has made, in my view, in terms of migrating from the single party state, where democratic space was seriously constricted, to where we are today. And frankly speaking, we are seeing extremely vibrant and open debate on many issues in this country today. We are also seeing a situation where we have a lot of people, either through civil society or through cases, challenging the authority of the state, sometimes even going to court to seek constitutional differences and interpretations on matters that affect our constitution. So these are very, very significant developments where you see civil society, the rising public interest on matters of the cases that are constitutional. These are significant. We've seen more freedom of the media. We have also been able to see some institutions that may not be fitting the bill, institutions that are supposed to anchor democracy. We have also seen them failing to do so in certain areas. Sometimes it is parliament, sometimes it's the other arms of government, maybe the devolved organs of our society, the county assemblies. We have also seen a situation where there is a domineering executive in this country that has more or less perhaps overridden other arms of government, like the judiciary. We have also seen parliament sometimes forgetting their role as parliament and more or less playing the role of the executive. We have also seen some of the county governors operating as if they are part of the national government and not speaking out to issues that are for the devolved units. So these are challenges that I would say exist. But by and large, if you are to ask me, I think the democratic space has broadened. We are, however, seeing some movements that could be dangerous, depending on how they're managed. You see, right now we are all going through a COVID scenario. And we would like, first of all, to put the lives of our people first, above everything else. But we also see a situation where sometimes the laws regarding enforcement of the COVID protocols are being enforced selectively. That is dangerous. And bearing in mind that we are heading towards an election, we would like to see enforcement of law being even-handed across the board, so that we do not get to the general election in 2022 and we start seeing selective application or enforcement of the law. That can be very dangerous for the outcome of what we purport to be a democratic process. So let me leave it at that so that I can allow the other panelists to also comment and share their views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And thank you for setting the tone for this conversation. We would like to just delve into the conversation. When I had this conversation with Otichilo of Conrad, the idea was for us to break it down and understand the current state of affairs. So I would like to just pose this to Honorable Boss. We know that with the repulsion of Section 2A of the Constitution, Kenya has experienced immense gains with regards to democratic processes. So would you say that these gains are reaching the common mwananchi? If you could kindly unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. I just say I want to associate with some of the sentiments by His Excellency, the former Prime Minister, Honorable Mudavadi. It is true that we've made some gains, but it's also true that on some other issues, we have had some setbacks. And usually as a good student of history, I always like to look back at it. The more things change, the more things remain the same. My opinion and my own evaluation of what has happened that have gone on is that we seem to be going back the same historical path. If you remember, Kenya started, and I think I'll just tell me a minute to just recap the history. Kenya started as a multi-party constitutional parliamentary democracy or monarchy, because we had a prime minister reporting to the Queen. So we had KANU and we had KADU. And Mzee Jomo Kenyatta won on a KANU ticket in the first pre-independence elections. And Jaramogi was in, the others were in KADU. What happened is, between 1966 and 1969, there was a split between Mzee Jomo Kenyatta and Jaramogi Oginga. And when that happened, Oginga together with Anyona decided to form KPU. And if you remember what happened at that time, is that they began to do exactly what is happening today. The rejection of democratic space. Voice of Kenya was not allowed to cover anything to do with KPU and their members. Persons like Njonjo and Tom Mboya made amendments to the law to curtail the independence of another political party. In fact, KPU was not registered and was given a complete blackout by the then Voice of Kenya. Then let's fast forward. After 1969, Kenya basically up to 1982 operated as a de facto one-party state. Even though we were a multi-party state, KANU was the only party. KPU members were disqualified on technicalities. All of us remember that. KPU was in fact later banned, and there was detention without trial. And that was the mayhem that we had at that time. In 1982, we all know that there was an attempted coup, but thereafter, again, Odinga and Anyona did try to register another party, but instead at that time, what happened is that they weren't allowed to register the party. In fact, the law was amended to make Kenya now a de jure one-party state, which means it was only KANU, which was the only political party. Remember, before it was a de facto. That's why Jomo Kenyatta was unopposed the whole time, because Kenya was a de facto one-party state. It then became a de jure party state. If you look at, then we degenerated to 1988 when we had Mulolongo, the most ridiculous rules ever in history, where we had the queue system and so on. Again, we reached the height of, it was a law with our democracy. By 1992, there was public anger and defiance against the system. So I think those in power now must see that when you constantly close democratic space, you are on a slippery slope, and eventually there will be public defiance. That is why we had the suburb riots, which was led by people like Raila Odinga, who are the freedom fighters, who then fought against the one-party state to be able for Kenya to have a multi-party state. And for that, we shall always give them credit. Many of them were injured. Many of them had their families disrupted, and so on. And many prison and it went on. But because of the resilience of Kenyans, and with pressure from the international community, we then had all the political detainees released. People were allowed to register political parties. Section 2A was deleted, and Kenya allowed to be a multi-party state again. So despite the fact at that time Moi won, at least there was some form of, we were regaining the democratic space that we had lost consistently since 1966 by Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. It's important for Kenyans to realize that. So when you look at today what is happening in Kenya, even though it was a great time when Kenyans spoke during the 2005, when they rejected the constitution. And remember, Kenyans were not really rejecting the constitution in 2005. They were rejecting Kibaki by isolating. And I know Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, you are among those who are isolated from the famous Pentagon. And you participated, and one time you were all kicked out. And because of that, the National Rainbow Coalition emerged. And by that time, Kenya decided that we wanted to form a new path. Today, it's happening in Kenya when you see the disruption of the meetings of the deputy president, when you look at the manner in which the rules set out by the National Security Council are being used is completely wrong. Remember that churches are not, under the Public Order Act, the churches are not public places for public rallies. And I'd like to bring Kenyans to the attention of the Article 239 of our Constitution under the National Security Organ says, in performing their functions and exercising their powers, the national security organs must not act in a partisan manner, further any interest of a political party or cause, prejudice a political interest or political cause, or anything legitimate under our Constitution. So for me, the happenings recently have actually, we have clawed back on the democratic space that Kenyans had fought. And unfortunately, those who participated in fighting for it are actually, I mean, Raila Odinga fought for this democratic space, but now he's helping claw back. It's sad.
So, Honorable Boss, as we take stock of the democratic gains and losses, what percentage would you give Kenya with regards to, I mean, being able to do better post-independence?
I think we were doing well up to 20, maybe 15, but after 2017, in the last 1 year, in fact, immediately after from the handshake, we are going back to a one-party state. When Jubilee is told not to field a candidate in favor of ODM, which is an opposition, then we are going back to a one state. It means the handshake is intended to return us back to the KANU days.
Thank you so much, Honorable. I think I want to bring in Honorable Edwin Sifuna right now. What are your initial thoughts on taking stock of democratic gains in Kenya? Kindly unmute.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Of course, it's an honor to be on this panel. In any discussion on the democratic gains of our country so far, I think it is important to start with what it is we understand to be a democratic state. In my view, there are certain things that have to be in place for a country to be, described as a truly democratic state. It doesn't just revolve around political parties and political activities. I understand a democratic state to be a country that has a vibrant and free civil society, a country that respects the rule of law, a country that has a free press. There's freedom of speech and expression, and even freedom of association. Now, if you look at all these rights that we've described as tenets of a truly democratic society, we have a long history as a country, and my teacher Gladys Sholei has tried to bring up some of that history. The truth of the matter is that we have made certain gains since the days when we had a one-party state, and of course, it was not just the existence of the one-party state that was problematic. It was also the fact that even some of the freedoms that we enjoy today, you can imagine a society that has only one media outlet, like has been described by my teacher Gladys there. And now we are able to do meetings like we are doing here, independent of any governmental authority. I remember Raila, my party leader, has told me about stories where if you were to meet more than 2 or 3 people, you needed to inform the authorities that you were going to meet. We would never have, imagined a situation where when we were growing up under KANU, and Mudavadi was part of that system, you would never answer the head of state. These days, you see the president has posted something on social media, and a young person who has no power at all, just a regular citizen, can actually answer back and say, I don't agree with this position. So I definitely would agree that we have opened up more as a society, but we have faced certain challenges because I think the fact that Kenyans generally desire to live in an open and democratic society has already been established. The problem we have is that with individuals, is with individuals who, whenever they are in power, want to use that power to repress others, forgetting that one time that shoe will be on the other foot. So in terms of, for instance, political participation, I would say that we have a constitution that expresses our republic to be a multi-party republic. We, in fact, at ODM have insisted that Kenya must remain a multi-party democracy. You understand that there are people on the other side who argued that we need only 2 strong political parties. You can see how that is going with our friends there. We were the ones who insisted and said, if the constitution defines our republic to be a multi-party state, don't force us into a duopoly of political parties like we have seen in other states. The repression of civil society, for instance, what we always request for in this debate is just a bit of honesty. If you look at what has happened in terms of repression of a free and open civil society, you cannot say that, for instance, it started after the handshake. You remember that in the run-up to the election in 2017, and Honorable Mudavadi can bear me witness, there were organizations that were civil society organizations that tried to even conduct civic education in Kenya. And the government at the time interpreted that to mean that they were coming to help the opposition. I remember some of them were even deported. Even the changes that we had to the NGO Act, and the introduction of the Public Benefits Organization Act, and the entire change of the law regarding the operation of non-governmental organizations was a step towards repressing a free civil society that was not able to be allowed to do its job. If you look at the freedom of the media, if we are honest, you will remember, Mheshimiwa Gladys Shule, that there was a time prior to the 2017 election that media houses had been threatened to the extent that they would not be able to even run political rallies by the opposition live, because they had been threatened by this law that if you air things that can be deemed to be incitement, you will be held personally liable. When you come to repression of political activities, I am very surprised, Madam Shole, that you place the timeline when we started sliding back to the old days to after the handshake. If Honorable Mudavadi can remember quite well, we were in courts every day as members of the then NASA coalition, trying to enforce this right to even assemble peaceably and unarmed. You will remember that we went all the way to the High Court, and it is actually the High Court that defined the rights and responsibilities of people participating in peaceable assembly. In terms of curtailing the right to assemble, I don't think there are people in this country, and Mudavadi is here, who have soaked in more tear gas than than us on the NASA side, simply because we were trying to hold meetings. We had this law that was passed by Jubilee, the Security Laws Amendment laws, that was actually passed forcibly in the National Assembly to compel the police, or to give police power to detain people without trial, to be able to repress political activity. I remember many of our Heshimiwa were being arrested for things that were being called hate speech. I remember Honorable Florence Mutua of Busia, one time they were arrested and they spent some time in Pangani. And when the charges were being read out in court, everybody just burst out laughing. So we have come a long way. And as ODM, I want to say it here, as the people who fought for the second liberation, we are not celebrating or enabling any of the things that are happening now. I want to assure you, Madam Gladys Shule, that we, as a lawyer, and you trained me in the university, I will never stand for repression of anybody's rights. what is happening right now, in my view, even the edict about requiring a permit to meet is manifestly illegal. It is manifestly unconstitutional, and we will say it. But what we appreciate is that you, on the other side of a political argument, now have opportunity to see what we've been saying. And if after all this smoke has cleared, we can move together and create a society that defends everyone irrespective of who is in power, we will have won as Kenya.
All right. Thank you so much, Honorable Edwin Sifuna. I would like to bring in Mr. Tom Boya as a scholar and as a political analyst. In your view, as we take stock of democratic gains and losses, where are we at? And before you come in, Honorable Edwin, can you give us a percentage in terms of gains in your view?
Our gains, it's very difficult to quantify because we seem to take 10 steps forward and then we take 8 steps backwards and then we do another 2 steps forward. But okay. I would say if you are comparing, for instance, from the era of KANU from around 2002 up to today, I would say we are at 60% and we are going to get to where we want to be as a people.
Thank you very much. Karibu sana, Mr. Tomboy.
Thank you so much, Maureen. First of all, let me, it is an honor to be with my good politician whom I've never met face to face, that is Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. The first time I'm meeting Sholei, and of course, my good friend Edwin Sifuna. I've listened to the previous speakers, but from academic point of view, away from being partisan, playing partisan politics, allow me to shed some light. I'll pick it from where Honorable Musalia Mudavadi left, that for us really to take stock of the gains and losses of democracy in this country, there are certain parameters that we can bring forth. One, we can talk of the procedural democracy and the substantive democracy, and that is what I want to confine myself to. And procedurally, of course, Kenyans have been voting every election cycle, but the substantive where Musalia left is what is interesting to me when we are looking at the democratic gains. And that is, remember the definition of democracy by the people, of the people, for the people. But let us look at for the people. And here I've been listening to Honorable Musalia Mudavadi for the last, I think, 1 month and a half. He has been talking about the same thing. Democracy should serve the citizenry in terms of service delivery from the institutions that, if you listened to Honorable Sholei, who gave the trajectory of the democratic development of this country. To me, I'm interested in has such democratic gains really ensured service delivery to the citizenry. To me, my verdict will be a big no, because all the democratic gains in terms of democratic space, freedom of association, freedom of speech, independence of institutions, the legislature, executive, etc., have not really translated into giving meaningful life to our citizens because of one hindrance to this is corruption, which sometimes back, the president said his hands are tied. Is it because of the constitution and so forth? But most importantly, and which resonates with today's debate, I have to acknowledge that the same democratic trajectory that Honorable Sholei gave, we give thumbs up to our youth from 1992 of the youth. When you come to it specifically by the youth, and this you can go to the Arab Spring. Yesterday, I think the last 1 week, you've seen what happened in Nigeria, courtesy of the youth in Sudan. But then the same youth have never given a voice. Honorable Sifuna talked about political participation. This is stipulated in the constitution that gives the youth that room to participate in the decision-making process, but there's never been that effective participation in the decision-making process. But more importantly, are the youth really given that level playing ground to rise from even a student leader in high school at the university, whether poor or rich, to rise or to join Honorable Cholet in parliament? That to me makes me shiver when we are taking stock of the democratic gains for the people and the involvement of the youth in this process. I rest my case because there's more to be discussed.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Tomboya. I would like to bring in His Excellency Honorable Musalia. With regards to selective enforcement of the laws, which we know for a fact is clawing back democracy and indeed is showing signs of becoming more dangerous in the political processes, what is your view in stopping this idea of selective application of the law?
Actually, the people who are guilty of selective application of the law are the people in power, because they are the ones who are supposed to enforce it. The party that is in power today is Jubilee. So what we are saying is that I cannot direct the police, neither can Sifuna or anybody else. But those who are part of the ruling party are the ones who can direct the police and tell them what to do, when to release tear gas canisters and not when to. So part of this matter that we are seeing is a situation of some dysfunction within the ruling coalition. And I just want to, I was listening to Cholet and she gave a very good account of the historical aspect. But I remember her as the registrar of the High Court having a great moment at Kasarani when the government of Uhuru and Ruto was being sworn in, and she was at the center of it. And you see, I don't know whether you remember that, Cholet. You were right there, and you look good. By the way, let me not.
I feel sad about it.
Yeah, you feel sad about it, but there you are. You making sure the instruments are being transferred smoothly, legally, constitutionally from the Moi, the Kibaki regime to the Uhuru, and everybody thought maybe this is a new beginning and a new moment. But now things may be different.
Okay.
When you sit, I just want to emphasize this, that the point I made, and I think Tomboya has touched on to it, is that people want to see the fruits of democracy. This is important. And if we go back to what may be happening, when the party that is in power is at conflict with itself, and other Kenyans are beginning to feel the wrath of their own internal conflict, then it means that somewhere along the line, our institutions of democracy have been weakened, or they are being weakened systematically, and it calls for all Kenyans of goodwill to start examining these institutions.
Okay.
For instance, when you talk about the youth, as Tomboya had said, we may have to ask ourselves that whether it is ANC or ODM or Jubilee, do we have some preferential arrangements for youth who want to take up positions as long as they are constitutionally able to do so in the context of whether it is MCA or parliamentary? Or do we subject them to the same nomination fees across the board? These are things that even within political parties may have to be examined to see if that space is coming through. But frankly speaking, good governance is under threat. And good governance here is that Honorable Gladys Cholet is feeling a lot of pressure now. But you remember the platform they put through, the platform and the agenda they propagated. Government itakuwa nusu ya Uhuru, nusu ya Ruto. Now, if you are entering the governance system of a nation, and that becomes the basis of your arrangement, you can see the damage that has come to visit us today, because Kenya should not be seen as, ethnic groups coming together to share the spoils of war to the complete detriment of other Kenyans. Now, I think what we should learn from this is that we should not continue the game of ethnicizing our institutions, ethnicizing the public service, ethnicizing institutions like the judiciary and what have you, saying that watu 10 wametoka hapa, sasa nataka 10 watoke huku. And this thing has even filtered into our security forces and the recruitment of young men and what have you. You find it's become a formula where they say that tunataka kila kabila iwe pale, nusu ya huyu, nusu ya huyu, nusu ya huyu, without looking at the merits of some of these things. And now they're coming back to haunt us. So going forward, if we want to build a strong nation and have strong space for everybody, while we recognize our diversity, I think we should come together on a more serious basis. And we should never, never, never again, like now she's condemning the handshake because she believes the handshake is about Raila and Uhuru. But when the others were saying the government is shared between Uhuru and Ruto, these complaints are not there. The other thing that has come in under this constitution, which again needs to be dealt with, is this whole notion of a core presidency or core principles. This thing is becoming a disease, and in our society, we start getting to the position where we say, where does the buck stop? All right, knowing where the buck stops is not undermining democracy. It's bringing clarity in the space of governance. But here we were having people saying that everything is shared. It's co-shared, it's co-word, it's co-whatever. I don't know what else was co in this whole arrangement. But in the process, now those who are feeling that they're being edged out or they're not benefiting from what was perceived as a co-presidency, now the question is, maybe there's a threat to democracy. All right. I'm not saying that there are no fault lines. There are fault lines. But let us, as Kenyans, be more objective without going into an ethnic corner.
All right. Thank you so much. Honorable Edwin Sifuna, in light of what His Excellency has just spoken about, would you say that the selective application of the law, and if this is the case, then would you, from one of our participants, at least they're asking, do you think government is serious about implementing the laws that they had set in place in terms of gatherings?
Certainly, there is clearly the selective application of the law, and it is not something that anyone can dispute because it is something that everybody can see. But it did not start yesterday, or it did not start after the handshake. We have had these complaints for a very long time, and one of the things that we want to encourage, and I am happy that it has come up even in this discussion of the BBI, is that we need to examine our values. Because honestly, Maureen, in my view, anybody can build railways. Everybody should be able to put up physical infrastructure. But what are the values of the people that you elect to power? Is this someone who actually believes in the rule of law? And history does not lie, and you can't change it because they say the ink is already dry. All our histories are known. There are people who are prone to disposed or predisposed to obedience of the law, predisposed to upholding of the oaths that they take, including constitutional oaths. And there are people who, through their history, have proven that really these laws are just merely suggestions, and whenever it is inconvenient for them, they will step away from them. So we would like to have a society that lives up to its own constitution, that really we are all equal before the law. What is different, Maureen, is that during this time, we in the opposition are still saying that we can see selective application of the law. We are not cheering when our counterparts in Tanga are being tear gassed in churches. If you remember some of the conversation that was going on when we were being tear gassed, including in mortuaries and in churches and even in courts, this used to happen, and we could see members of the then Jubilee administration during the so-called tyranny of numbers. They were cheering and saying, in fact, the tear gas and the bullets are not enough. If we can agree on, as Kenyans, that there are certain fundamental things that we need to put in place, that it doesn't matter who is in power, we will all enjoy these rights. That if I have a court order, it doesn't matter if it is Shulei or if it is Musalia Mudavadi who's the president, he will obey that court order. I think we will have moved a step forward as a country. If we can all agree that a politically free society is one that requires or should allow any person to hold any sort of political meeting in any part of this country, then it doesn't matter if it is Sifuna who's president. You should be able to come comfortably to Bungoma and hold your own political rallies. And one of the things that Honorable Musalia has alluded to, the internal contradictions in Jubilee are what are fueling all these things. And in fact, if you had the deputy president when he spoke in Moronga, after the Moronga tour, he said that he knows the people who are responsible for the dispersal of his meetings, that it is in fact civil servants that he and the president employed. We have given him power under the constitution because it doesn't matter what the political reality is. The legal and constitutional reality is that he is still the deputy president of the republic. He should be able to resolve all those internal problems with his boss. If there are people that are civil servants who are essentially his subordinates, let him show us, like Musalia said, they told us that he is a co-president. Let him fire those people who are spoiling the party for him. But for us as players in the political space, we would never, even as bad as we are, we would never want to come to the level. For instance, you can all see what is happening in Tanzania, where candidates are barred from, political contests at the whim of someone, or you are suspended from campaigning. We want a free and open society where everybody can be able to sell their ideas and to exchange those ideas and to recruit people into their way of thinking without any hindrance. In terms of youth and women participation, this is something that we as political parties have to take up as a responsibility, because if the political parties themselves created an avenue for meaningful participation of young people and women in politics, I think we would make a greater step towards democratization of our republic and to give opportunity to these young people. So at least I can speak for myself at ODM. I still remain the youngest Secretary General in Kenya and even in the region. I would challenge my brother, my senior, Honorable Musalia. I know there's a vacancy now for Secretary General in ANC. Give it to a young person. Like myself, when I was appointed, I was 35. In Tanga, we have brilliant young minds there. Kina Aaron Cheruiyot, let them be given opportunity even in whatever political outfit that you will end up in. We see that you are giving young people opportunity to also shine on the national stage.
All right. Thank you so much, Honorable Sifuna. In light of Honorable Sifuna's admission of selective application of the law, Honorable Boss Shulei, what is your comment in this regard?
First of all, I must tell Sifuna that I'm immensely proud of him as his teacher now, that I know he still sticks to the rule of law as I trained him. Thank you for that. And I agree that I'm happy that you stand and say that this is wrong. And we need more voices to explain that this is wrong. And sometimes when people give the comparison of what happened during the old constitution or during the Kanu regime, people say what happened during the Kanu regime was bad, the detention without trial and so on. But what they must remember, that during the Kanu regime, it was legal to do so. At the moment, it is illegal. So there's a very big difference. Even the actions of the National Security Council, it had not been defined during the time of the old constitution. Currently, it's defined. If it was those days when people like Honorable Raila would be picked in the middle of the night. They would be locked up and made sure that they didn't see their families and nobody knew where they were. They're the ones who then, because of their own experiences, they were able to say that we want inserted in the constitution a law that says someone must be taken to court within 24 hours. Why did we put in Article 231 that the power of the security organ should not be used in a partisan manner or in an unfair manner or an unequal manner? It's because we have seen historically that we had those challenges. When we look at the way we are allowing political parties to register, again, it's lessons that we learned from the past. So in fact, if you look at our current constitution, we tried to use this constitution to resolve every single problem that we had previously had as Kenya. If you look at the swearing in of President Kibaki in 2007 at night, which sparked the violence all over the country, you can see that because of that, we inserted a section in the constitution that clearly states that the president must be sworn between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. No country puts that in the constitution, but it was because of what we historically had suffered as a country. So all we are asking, the problem is currently in the country, we are not following the constitution. We made so many gains and put them in the constitution. The challenge we are having is the actual implementation of those various laws. So as we say, we gained because we passed the laws. We gained the 50 pieces of legislation to implement the current constitution. That was done. That is a gain. But the problem or the challenge that we are having is that it's not touching us at a reality on the ground. As Tom Mboya said, the people have to feel it. It has to be for the people. So that as long as people are being harassed by the police, or that people don't have economic development, or people feel that they're not being allowed to express themselves freely, then it doesn't matter what gains we made at the constitutional level. People have to feel. At the end of the day, the ordinary Mwananchi should say that this has happened. We never thought that there would be a situation where people would be tear gassed in churches, because that is what used to happen in the past. Hence the reason why the laws came out clearly to say that churches are not political rallies. Those are places of worship, and that they must not be interfered with. And the challenge that we have is that.
Okay. Mr. Tom Mboya, it almost sounds as if we are retrogressing in terms of democracy gains. Now, 2 political parties dominate parliament currently. With the lack of an opposition in parliament, would you say that our democracy is working as it should?
Well, Maureen, just the answer to that question builds on what Honorable Shulea just talked about. That let us remember what Honorable Musalia Mudavadi talked about earlier on. That so far so good, because courtesy of the new progressive constitution, but its implementation. And Honorable Musalia Mudavadi alluded to the overbearing of the executive. And this is what Honorable Shulea is talking about. It is the executive that implements the constitution. And that then brings over what we talk, the point under discussion, the selective application of certain laws. And the point, Maureen, to be made is, if we are supposed to implement this constitution for the betterment of ordinary Kenyans, at the moment, in the next 5 years, in the next 50 years, so that any amendments of the constitution, any laws that the constitution permits us to come up with, we make it not for the current political moment, but for our future generations. And so what I'll say in response to that question is the overbearing of the executive in the application or implementation of the constitution is something that needs to be met.
All right. So I'd like to pose this to Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. In light of the governance reform agenda, we have seen that in the referendum conversation, they're talking about a hybrid system with suggestions of the winner should not take it all as a solution to some of the post-election problems usually we encounter. What is your view in this regard?
Well, Maureen, I think we may be jumping the gun here. One fundamental institution that we have not talked about is the IEBC.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly speaking, whether we are going to adopt a hybrid system or any other, and there's going to be a process where there's some election that is taking place, until the issues that were raised by the Supreme Court are dealt with fully in the context of the referee of our democratic processes, we are going to have a lot of difficulty. Now, as to what will be the final outcome or amendment that is going to be proposed, I would be speculating if I talked about it here, because we hear of a document in the name of the BBI, which is yet to be made public. And until it's made public, I cannot intelligently comment on those issues. So you'll bear with me on that particular aspect. But the IEBC and what was highlighted by the Supreme Court in the petition that was filed after the 2017 election needs to be dealt with. That thing still remains. And until we sort that out, whether we are planning a referendum or whether we are going to get to the general election, I think if this issue around the IEBC is not resolved, we shall continue having very serious contestation as to whether the will of the people of Kenya has been truly reflected in our electoral processes. Elections or the election cycle should not just be a routine exercise to meet a constitutional requirement.
Okay.
It should genuinely reflect the will of the people at that particular moment in time.
All right.
I think that's important. Then secondly, I just want to quickly touch on two things. The issue about Msambweni, where Honorable Sholay mentioned something about the ruling party deciding they're not going to field and saying that has automatically made it, we're going back into our own party state. But not too long ago, there was Kibera constituency, which had a by-election. ANC fielded a candidate. ODM fielded a candidate, and indeed even Jubilee did field a candidate. And in Msambweni, we are also seeing a situation where there's an independent candidate. And also we are seeing other political parties fielding theirs. For instance, Wiper, I think, has indicated they're going to field a candidate. ANC is not fielding a candidate in Msambweni, but that will be something else in 2022. So all I would say is that there are certain issues that may be going on now, which would have to be dealt with. But let us address this challenge around violence. The Moronga Incident, one young man was 21 and the other was 15. We must ask ourselves, were these young men freedom fighters? Were they fighting for our independence, for them to die? Were these young men agitating because their salaries had not been paid? It's a trade union issue? No. Were these young men fighting because it's a stolen election? No. These were young men in a period that is not an election time, being lured to an epicenter of political activity through means that we don't understand. Was it through handouts? Was it through coercion? And they lost their lives. Do we have to see this happening to us Kenyans again? I don't think we should allow that to happen. And therefore, as political players, I think we need to be alive to this thing. We should not conflict our democratic space, but surely we should also exercise responsibility, because those children died because of irresponsible political behavior. That's the reality of it. Okay. And if we do not check it and it builds up, we are going to see heightened and very responsible political activity come the general election. That should not happen. All lives.
Can I say something?
Yes,
Maureen?
please, Karibu. Yes, please.
First, just to buttress something that Honorable Musali has raised on the issue of political cooperation amongst political parties. I think it is only in Kenya where cooperation amongst political parties is actually viewed as a negative as opposed to a positive. If you look at our law, the Political Parties Act itself, it actually sets out that political parties should seek to cooperate as much as possible. There is nothing wrong with political parties cooperating, especially if they are advancing the interests of a nation. So it is the foundational basis even for the handshake and certain decisions that have been made, for instance, from the Jubilee side, not to unnecessarily antagonize a partner that we're working on a very serious project. Number two, on the issue of the BBI, which has also, in terms of the effectiveness of Parliament as an institution, the truth of the matter is that between the period of 2013 and 2017, many members of Parliament who were elected, especially under Jubilee, thought themselves to be part of the executive. You will remember that entire conversation of the tyranny of numbers. And what happened is that even the constitutional safeguards that are woven into our constitution in terms of checking of the executive were essentially neutered. It was inconceivable, and we saw it, that a tool such as, say, impeachment of a cabinet secretary or even impeachment of a president would actually be utilized against the Jubilee president. One time there was supposed to be a motion, you remember, against CS Anwar Guru. We all know how that ended. We saw this culture of parliamentarians being summoned to State House, for instance, to be told who's going to be the speaker, who's going to be the chairman of which committee. Those were all issues that we have seen have undermined this particular process. So for me, I can speak from a position of relative authority in terms of the solutions that are being proffered in the BBI conversation, because I participated in the BBI conversation. And the report that was launched at Bomas, I think it was in November of last year, we have been told by at least the steering committee that not much is going to change in terms of the recommendations that we saw in the report that was launched at Bomas. They assured us that the process that was going to come after that was a process of validation, which essentially means to see if the views you gave have been captured in the report. So I can say, for instance, that there is a mechanism that has been proposed that we do have members of cabinet coming from Parliament as well. Madam Shole is here. She can bear me witness that extremely onerous for a member who's seeking an answer from a cabinet secretary to have to speak to the chair of a committee to seek an answer, and then that chair of the committee comes back, and maybe if there's a follow-up question, it is impossible for that chair to process unless they go back to the CS. The CSs are only being summoned before committees, and we all remember a time when cabinet secretaries were in the house and answers could be gotten directly from the cabinet secretaries. I do also remember when we had, for a brief moment, a prime minister in this republic, and the prime minister's question time was the most active period in parliamentary proceedings, and members of parliament would always come ready with questions to hear directly from the prime minister what the government is doing to address some of their questions. So I am happy that, in fact, in the BBI proposals, on the strength of the knowledge that not much is going to be changed or new ideas introduced into the report that we saw in November, which everybody agreed was okay, including my friends from Madam Sholei's political persuasion. They said they liked that report. So it was just about fine-tuning the views to isolate the ones that required constitutional amendment, the ones that required administrative action, and the ones that required legislative action. On the question of the electoral body, as I said in the beginning, there are certain things that people look for in a democratic state. And one of the things is a state that holds regular, free and fair elections. So we have had difficulty, at least there are regular elections in the country. But as to whether those elections are then free and fair is something that is still up for debate. The question of the IEBC has been addressed in the report that was launched in November. And on the strength of the assurance by the steering committee that nothing is going to change, we know that at least a solution has been proposed to go back to probably a model like the IPPG model, which by many accounts people have attributed the IPPG model to the successful election in 2002 that everybody seemed to agree that was the most free and fair in recent times.
All right. Honorable Boss, I see you want to speak. Karibu.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. I just want to speak to the point that Kenyans feel that winner takes it all methodology is not correct. The reality of elections is the winner takes it all by becoming the president and the deputy president. That's the reality. Winner takes it all is that when I get the highest number of votes in Wasingishu, then I will take it all. I will be the MP. We cannot share and have 3 MPs on that position. I think it's a very simplistic way that we are looking at it. When Kenyans talk about winner takes it all, the way I see it is that we should be that if one person is the president and the other is the deputy president, then to ensure that winner doesn't take it all, then we ensure that when we appoint the CASS, when we appoint the cabinet secretaries, when we appoint the PSS, when we appoint the head of the army, when we appoint the Attorney General, we make sure that they come from other parts of Kenya other than the president and the deputy president. That is how you achieve inclusivity. When we talk about recruitment in the public service, we also balance it out. Then that way people will not feel that because somebody from my ethnic group is the president, then it means that every other ethnic group is locked out of positions in government. We can spread it out. What people also want to see as part of inclusivity is no matter who, from whichever ethnic group is the president, that every other community in Kenya have schools, have hospitals, have resources for development, for roads, for electricity, for them to, their businesses to be able to thrive, for their kind of economic activities to be able, that is inclusivity. So inclusivity, you can spread it out. And we already have that embedded in our constitution. When we have the part 3, which talks about application of rights, it talks about children, it talks about women, it talks about people, that is part of the spreading out. When we say that we must ensure that those parts of Kenya that have been left behind since independence because they are considered as not being viable districts now need to be allocated the resources so they catch up with the rest of the country. That is what comes to inclusivity. When we look at our section on land and environment article in the Constitution, it talks about land use. It talks about when certain minerals are found in your area, how much is allocated to the local community. When we talk about community land and so on, that is inclusivity. So I don't know why people think that inclusivity means that we create 5 positions and distribute it among 5 big ethnic groups, then now people feel included. No, inclusivity is a development agenda and economic activity across the board, which brings us to the conclusion that Tom Boyer gave us. Democratic gain is when it has impacted the people. And that's why I'm saying how many hospitals have hospitals only been built in the places where the presidents, because that used to happen before, where the president's people are, or the deputy president's people are, then that will be lack of inclusivity. Right. But if we spread it across the country, or in all spheres of life, then that is inclusivity.
All right. I want to bring in Mr. Tom Boyer. In light of the conversation around IEBC, and also what Honorable Sifuna has spoken to with regards to the Constitution encouraging coalition arrangements. We know that political parties almost come together based on ethnic arrangements to be able to garner numbers, to be able to win an election. Would you say that, speaking from what Honorable Musalia talked about, that coalition arrangements are sustainable in the future? Mr. Tom Boyer, karibu.
I'm having network challenges. I hope I got you right. In view of what Honorable Sifuna talked about, Musalia Mudavadi, and even, of course, Honorable Shulei, coalition politics is an issue that is left to political elites. Neither can you entrench it in the Constitution to give a legal framework. This is the way you're going to play it out, but it comes, they're conditioned by circumstances, political circumstances. So the interest of parties, party leaders, and so forth is what will define it. But and the world over, Maureen, in certain political jurisdictions, the essence of political parties is to what Cholet was talking about, is to win political power. And how you win that political power is sometimes predicated upon on the need of having coalitions. So that is dependent on certain political circumstances, which of course I might not be able to authoritatively, because it is so amorphous, it is dynamic, and you cannot perhaps, of course, predict. But there's something that I think Honorable Cholet talked about, which is very important. The debate about the winner takes it all. And I think it is imperative why political leaders campaign. They campaign to serve the interests of the citizens. And the problem that we have because of experience is the politics of revenge, the politics of exclusion, so that if one party wins, what they do is to exclude the other party, and therefore you revenge. If Maureen was maybe a public civil servant, but was leaning towards that party that did not make it, then Maureen will have to leave. So that is politics of exclusion. And so if you go back to what Cholet, if politicians can only speak to the constitution, so that when you come to power, you don't just have to win it for the sake of the ruling party, but you are governing or serving the interest of the 42 million plus Kenyans. To me, that is a conversation I think that we need to escalate in future events such as this.
All right. Thank you so much. I would like us to go to the second point of our conversation, which was what are the glaring legal and political gaps in strengthening democracy at the local and the national level? And I'd like to bring in Honorable Sifuna to just speak to that. What is the obvious that we are missing out in terms of legal and political gaps for strengthening democracy?
Thank you, Maureen. First, let me start by just making one thing clear. I think the argument about the creation of additional positions, for instance, the proposal to have a prime minister, is not an inclusivity argument. From time immemorial, when we have discussed constitutional amendment, there has been a desire by Kenyans to dissipate the power of the executive. And this desire has come from a long way. I remember there was a time when the president, all the powers of the state unified under the presidency. Madam Cholet, you'll remember there was a time when the president used to appoint judges directly himself, and he could hire and fire them. And the creation of another center of power to be able to work that out in the introduction of the Judicial Service Commission has helped dissipate the powers of the president. So even the argument on the positions at the top is not to say that we would like to see a lawyer being the prime minister so that we feel included. No. It is a dissipation of the power of the president, which everyone knows is going to help us in terms of moving our democracy forward. What we have done, and I want Conrad Adenioa to take note of this, we have proposed as the young people in ODM that immediately the BBI report is released, instead of politicians mobilizing young people to go and meet out there in the streets like they did in Kenol and Moronga, we want you to mobilize people to come to town hall debates on the merits and demerits of the proposals that have been made there. So for instance, Maureen, you have asked, what is an obvious gap? We saw the tiff between the president and the judiciary on the appointment of judges. If you go back to the report of the Commission, Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, you will find the answers as to why people were making these proposals. You ask yourself the question, what were Kenyans trying to cure by creating an independent Judicial Service Commission to appoint judges? They said that historically, because of what they had seen in the hand of the executive weighing heavy on the judges, they would like the appointment of judges to be independent. So the retention of what we all agree as legal scholars, a largely ceremonial role for the president there, has put us in this quagmire that now even that little ceremonial space has brought us problem with the appointment of judges. The president simply won't append his signature to it. So what have we proposed? In the BBI, when we presented before the BBI, we said we would like a mechanism similar to what is in existence in the National Assembly, that after expiry of a certain period, if the president has not acted, it automatically executes itself. So there is that gap. There is the gap when it comes to matters of political parties to do with compliance by Parliament with its own law on funding of political parties. We have had discussions even at the CMD, where I'm the vice chair, with my colleagues who are running other political parties on review of the eligibility criteria for political parties. We had a very good presentation the other day where we were being shown which political parties that are registered have actually been participating in elections. Because there are people who register political parties, and it was shown from statistical data that some of them never present candidates even at MCA level. You see, the bulk of them maybe present candidates at MCA level. When you come to Parliament, the National Assembly, and the Senate, and at the presidential level, there are only 8 political parties that actually present candidates. So if this discussion really is about strengthening democracy, there are obvious gaps. And the most glaring gaps that I cannot forget to mention is implementation of the 2/3 gender rule, that as a country, we have been unable to put in place a mechanism for the realization of the 2/3 gender principle in the Houses of Parliament. And you will see in the proposals in the BBI that probably, given the nature and our history as a country, our cultural practices and prejudices against women, we might not, if we continue with the first past the post election system, we might not be able to achieve gender parity in the Houses of Parliament. So a proposal was made during that particular process that we have a mixed member proportional representation system that then ensures that we will at least hit that target of gender representation in the Houses of Parliament.
All right, thank you so much. I want to bring in Honorable Boss. Do you want to say something?
Yes, I think Sifuna is going at great lengths to discuss a document that none of us have seen and Kenyans haven't seen. It seems to be a secret between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga and the people around him. So I think he should be discussing a document we haven't seen. Let's wait for the document to come out. And when you talk about the fact that the power of the president to appoint judges like he has failed to do, that's why I said the problem we have at the moment is implementation of the Constitution. The president is supposed to appoint the 41 judges. He has disobeyed the Constitution. The only method of dealing with it is to impeach him for gross violation of the Constitution. But we are unable to impeach him because he's in bed with the opposition, and therefore we'll never have numbers to be able to impeach him. And so already there is mechanisms. And why don't we then amend the JSC Act? Why do we have to have a BBI, spend billions of money belonging to Kenyans to try and come and tell us something that we ought to have implemented in the first place? I don't think anything that has been put in the BBI one, the one launched in Bomas that we have all read, cannot be implemented through the Constitution. When we talk about inclusivity, we have the National Gender Commission, the National Human Rights Commission. We have so many independent commissions whose job it is to deal with inclusivity. So why don't we just implement those aspects of inclusivity?
All right, Honorable Sifuna, you have a right to response.
Sorry, Maureen, I think from the inception of the discussion, I said that I speak on these issues on the authority of the report that was released in November, and on the assurance by the steering committee that not much was going to change in terms of the ideas, because they had already collected the ideas from Kenyans, and that all they were going to do was to synthesize those views so that we identify which ones would require a constitutional amendment, which ones would need only a review of existing laws, and which ones would actually just require administrative action. So it is not to say, Madam Sholei, there will be no surprise in that document. If you go back and read the report that was released in November, we have been assured repeatedly that that is exactly what is coming to Kenyans. All the proposals, the views came from Kenyans. So you cannot expect that some people somewhere sat somewhere to inject in their own ideas that were not the views that were expressed by Kenyans during the
No, it's
BBI
just that you
process.
refer to the aspects of, you've referred to the aspects of the 2/3 and say that it's being cured under the BBI
It is
report.
there.
I don't
It is in the November report.
section.
Actually, the recommendation on changing the first past the post system is in the November report. What that shows you,
November
Maureen,
report is which one?
the
I have read
report that
the
was,
report inside
the
out.
report that
back to
was
front.
launched in Bomas.
Yes. So
I
what
think
is what
Conrad
proposal has it
find a
given?
way of
What,
making everyone
no, the
accord.
question I'm asking is, we already have embedded in the current constitution the issue of dealing with gender parity. It is embedded. The only thing that lacks is legislative formula, which is again ordered by the constitution and has been reordered by the courts and has been confirmed by the communique of the Chief Justice to the, so we do not need a BBI report to implement that. Let us just follow the constitution.
All right, all right.
Parliament must enact. So what is this? Why do we think we follow? If Kenyans can't follow a whole constitution, why would they follow a BBI report? And even if you
Maureen,
pass a new constitution, who tells you, what guarantee do we have that you will implement it?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Boss. I want to bring in Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. Come in.
And by the way, before you bring him, could you tell us how long more we are going on this?
We have another 20.
Okay, thank you,
Right.
because I have another appointment. Okay.
Thank you. Well, you remember I told you guys that the best thing to do is to cross the bridge when you get there. This is precisely why on the issue of the BBI, I thought that it would be prudent for all of us to actually wait for the final release and then implement a little bit more authoritatively. However, I think one of the things I just want to point out is, frankly speaking, when we say there are gaps, Maureen, you did mention that there are gaps within this build-up and consolidation of democracy. I think Parliament is becoming one of the biggest fault lines. When we just start looking at very fundamental indicators, one, let's look at, recently we have seen the Senate come up with their recommendations on issues around corruption related or procurement flaws in the Ministry of Health. I was talking to some of the people in that health committee, and it's shocking that Senate actually voted out that report, and some of the members of that Senate committee that had actually appended their signatures in support of that report are the ones who are participating in voting against their own report. Now, these are the issues that we find as serious contradictions in our Parliament. And until Parliament plays a key pivotal role, this Parliament is coming out more and more as a Parliament that went to bed with the executive. This is the dilemma that we have. And it has, if there are losses in democratic space, I think this Parliament will go down in history as the Parliament that presided over the most rapid losses that we saw in consolidating the democratic space. When you look at issues like public debt, we've seen our Parliament increase the ceiling without even demanding to see what are these additional borrowings that you're talking about. Where's the risk evaluation? Who has done the assessment? What is it for? How is it going to benefit the ordinary citizen? Some of these things have gone to waste. When we talk about the issue of institutions being able to function effectively, look at the allocation that Parliament supported for the judiciary. Parliament, if I may speak to this, I may be off the mark, maybe in a very minuscule way, but let's just take some statistics. Parliament has a staff complement of about 1,500 people. Parliament allocates to itself about 47 billion. How many days do they sit in a week, even if they say they're working in committees? When you look at how much was allocated to the judiciary, When you see a whole president of the judiciary of that arm of government lamenting in public, they were allocated 18 billion shillings or thereabout. How many days in a week does the judiciary sit?
Mhm.
What is their capacity in terms of technological advancement and so forth? Then we have critical organs that fight corruption. EACC, they're given 3 billion for a whole financial year. You have DPP is given almost the same amount. Then you have the DCI, they're given about 6 billion. Asset recovery and others are given about 1 billion. Money laundering institution, asset recovery. Now, when you look at these institutions, you now ask yourself, which institution is contributing to the weakening of very fundamental units in our society? I think Parliament. You cannot just tell us that the executive brings their numbers, the attorney brings his numbers, and you guys don't scrutinize them. So to me, I think without blinking, it's not because I'm not in that Parliament, no. The reality of the matter is that Parliament is a very serious fault line in the consolidation of democracy in this country.
Asante. Mr. Tomboya, what is the glaring legal and political gap in your view?
Maureen, I want to borrow some words from Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, that we have to be objective and truthful and honest in this conversation. Me, listening to the politicians, let me veer from that. One of the glaring legal gap that is imitating deepening of democracy, both at the national and country level, is the failure to implement our constitution to the letter. I'll just give you chapter 6 of the Constitution. If chapter 6 of the Constitution was to be implemented to the letter, then the services that Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, what I talked about and what was echoed by Honorable Shulei, will be a thing of the past. But because it has not been implemented both at the national level, it has been copy-pasted. It's lack of implementation at the national level. This has created a situation of non-delivery or unworkability of the Constitution to the people. And it has created two things: lack of accountability and transparency on the part of the elected officials. And something that I think I want to join Honorable Musalia in echoing, that even the legislature is not responsive, is not accountable. It has failed in its duty to perform its watchdog role on behalf of the citizenry, the debt ceiling that I talked about. And so to me, chapter 6, its lack of implementation is one of the glaring legal gap.
All right. Thank you so much. I want us to conclude the conversation by discussing one topic of interest, which is the current political landscape enabling the youth to actively engage in meaningful politics? So the way it is, as we had discussed earlier, young people have been used and misused, and some have lost their lives, as Honorable Musalia had mentioned earlier. So would you say that in the current political landscape, there has been deliberate effort to enable young people to engage meaningfully, even in light of the wheelbarrow conversation? Honorable Bosfule.
I think the reality is I am disappointed personally that the youth haven't been included, despite the fact, as much as we'd have wanted, despite the fact that we have part 3 of our constitution, which clearly requires us to do so. despite the fact that we know some of the most brilliant minds in modern technology, modern type of economic activities is in the hands, like IT, is in the hands of our young people. That hasn't been done sufficiently. And that is why you look at, and that's why I agree with His Excellency Musalia Mudavadi that Parliament has failed. And being a member of Parliament, I do accept that castigation of Parliament. It is in fact true. And many of my colleagues who have been in Parliament before have said, actually, this is not the Parliament that we used to know. Because Parliament now, we have a committee of youth affairs, gender, and labor. They should be summoning Margaret Kobia and asking her what is happening to inclusivity of youth. Remember at the time when the president appointed Moody Awori, appointed, I think, Mary Wamboi, appointed, I don't know, there was a whole raft of retired persons who had served to the highest levels in government and had no need to prove themselves, yet we left out youth. Yet we have young people who do that job even better than you and I today. So there has been a sidelining. I'm disappointed in because IT is really where the young people would have gone, or the blue economy that they were talking to. But if you looked at the manner in which even everything was conducted around that, there wasn't a deliberate effort to include the youth who actually have more knowledge on that. Yes, we got a youthful minister of IT, but he will go down in history as having actually surrendered it to people who have no knowledge of technology. You can't compare even my knowledge of technology, which is quite high, to be like what I see with the youth out there. When you look at IT centers that were built in every sub-county, that has also not succeeded. And there's been a challenge on that. So there hasn't been a deliberate effort. It is disappointing, and not because the Constitution lacks the framework. The Constitution has the framework, but it is actually, that's why I keep on going back, it's implementation of the Constitution. So the BBI report says that there is chronic unemployment in Kenya, that the youth are disillusioned. Those are the words it uses. But it does not tell us the solution. It should have been telling us, let us implement those parts of the Constitution that allows, because the Constitution for the first time mentions youth severally, but that has not been able, that's not been able to be achieved.
All right, Honorable Sifuna, I see you want to speak, but I want to bring in His Excellency Musalia. I have seen you work with young people on part of implementing your agenda, and even as you vie for presidency, you have shown interest in the group that we call the young people. And so what would you say is the current political, is the current political space enabling young people to work and to participate in the democracy building process?
Well, I think it still needs to be broadened.
Yeah.
And I want to tell my friend Sifuna that very soon he'll see an equally young man becoming general of ANC. So watch this space in a short while. But we still need to do a little more, much more actually. For one, within the political parties and even within the framework of parliament, I think we should actually loosen the law that deals with the sharing of political party funds. Because if we want to provide space for parties to grow younger people in the political arena, I think that is one area that needs to be looked at so that it is not too rigid. Assuming through a rigged election, for example, you had a situation where one party won 80% of the seats that are available for election today. Let's just say hypothetically that happened. Now, if that happened, then it would mean that it's only one political party in the entire country that would be benefiting from the political parties fund. That surely is very serious to the growth of democracy. So we need to look at it. Three, the final thing that I would want to say is that the young people need to be respected. I went into politics fairly young, and I had my ups and downs, but I also have contributed very significantly to where Kenya is today. And the more recent example is the Team Kenya that was in the Senate debate. on aspects of resource allocation. They went through a lot of challenges. Challenges where some of them have been bundled in Land Rovers and taken to different parts of the country on this debate on resource allocation. But where have we come to now? We have come to a situation where what was perceived as their intransigence has now contributed to a more positive formula for county governments. So these are aspects where when youth or youthful minds are being suppressed, it's a disservice to the growth of democracy and a disservice to the growth of this country. Finally, youth involvement cannot be solved through tokenism. This I maintain, and I will always maintain. We need to look at policies that are holistic with proper participation of the young people so that we find solutions together to make the country better, to make their operational environment much better so that they can either thrive in business or if they're entering in politics, they can enter into politics on a level playing field. This is particularly important, but we should not put the economy on a wheelbarrow because frankly speaking, listening to what Sholoi said about the chronic dilemma of the country, the economy, the Kenyan economy is on a wheelbarrow.
All right. It cannot be said better than that. I want to bring in Honorable Sifuna.
Irene, Maureen, would you allow me just to close and then I can leave because I unfortunately I have another meeting.
All right.
Yes. Anyway, I just want to appreciate the time that we've had saying this, but my conclusive remarks would be that I strongly believe that this kind of conversations that we're having, that when we call out or criticize some of the processes that are going on in our country or what is going wrong, that is actually what builds a democracy. It is that kind of constant agitation that Kenyans went through that gave us a multi-party state, that gave us devolution, and it is where we are today.
All right.
This is in terms of devolution. We still have an opportunity to build on it. But that's why I believe is you don't rub it, you continue to build on the gains that you have at the moment. And I am very hopeful, as much as I'm disappointed with some items, but I do believe that Kenya is a great country. I believe that the youth, in fact, are 60% in 2022, 60% of the voters will be young people. And therefore, they will begin to shape the conversation. And I can assure you that by the time we get to 2032, the older people will be very lucky if they will get positions of power in this country, because that is going to shift. And luckily, our young people are immensely knowledgeable. I have traveled the world, but I have never met people as brilliant, intelligent, engaging, and very aware like Kenyan young people. So they're not to be taken for granted. And thank you very much. I do appreciate your time. And I'm happy for you to invite me any other time. Unfortunately, I have another appointment. I thought it was for 1 hour.
All right.
Thank you.
And
thank you, Prime Minister Sifuna. Keep it up. And thank you, Tom. And thank you, Maureen. Okay.
Thank you so much. I think on that note, we will just go to Sifuna. Sifuna, as you give your concluding remarks also, it will be interesting for you to mention what Honorable Musalia Mudavadi has mentioned with regards to the Political Parties Fund. I know that there has been a special interest with regards to special interest groups, and young people fall in that category. So if, as you speak to it, you will also be sharing with us if currently the political landscape is allowing for young people to participate. Karim.
I was hoping that Gladys would be here, because as the person nearest the bracket of youth, probably I would explain to her why young people are disillusioned. We have a society that puts you through school, a very strenuous academic program with a promise of a better life at the end, especially for many of us who are born in poor households. And then after the completion of that entire process, there really is nothing there for you. The BBI report correctly captures the problem that we don't have jobs for our young people that we're putting out of universities. Now, I'm surprised that she would say then that she doesn't know what the solution is. We need a government that will create the environment that actually attracts job creation through even private sector investments. if you look at the period between 2013 and 2017, all the jobs that we lost at Nakumat, all the jobs we lost at the various banks that were closing down their branches, those were not old people working there. If you look at the hostility that is directed towards the entertainment industry that employs very many young people, you will be very surprised that even while we were pushing to develop protocols for the resumption of other spheres of life, we never were as eager to develop protocols, for instance, for the resumption of the entertainment industry. And that is where the bulk of the young people are employed. Look at the hostility towards innovation and invention. When you come up with new apps and new ideas, are we extending the same support that we see in places like the US? If Facebook was founded in Kenya, we would not have it. If Twitter was founded in Kenya, it would have been killed at inception. Today, I was reading somewhere that the central bank has just deregistered all the money lending apps. Of course, we have challenges with money lending apps, but they have been a critical source of credit for young people, because credit is not available for young people from the mainstream lenders. So we need to be able to have a government that actually puts in place the right environment for job creation. If you're going to invest in a railway that we are all going to pay, then you leave it to be run by the Chinese. Our young people can't even work on their own railway. I mean, that is the source of the disillusionment. We have proposed, for instance, during the Bombers process or the BBI process, that we need to cushion youthful enterprises for from some of these things, that you can give them a tax holiday, for instance, of 7 years for them to establish themselves. We need to relook at the sources of credit for young people and to have an open mind to industries that we do not understand. Unfortunately, if you have old people running the country, it might not be as easy for them to understand that there are new innovations and new ways of doing things that can actually earn people money. Young people are making money from Instagram. And if you try and explain to some of our leaders how Instagram works, for instance, it is difficult. So we would like for not people to think of us as a special group that needs to be given certain things. If you sort out the economy of the country, we who are the bulk of the population will essentially benefit. When it comes to political parties, political participation of youth has to be done deliberately by the leadership of the party. If it is not done deliberately, because of all the problems we face, it is not going to happen. We have been deliberate, at least from the ODM perspective, that whenever, for instance, we are reconstituting organs of a party, like we did with the National Elections Board, we went and got somebody from the Youth League to come now to the Mainstream Elections Board. When we were constituting the disciplinary committee, the same thing. When we were doing the Legal Affairs Committee, we went for people who are young lawyers in the Youth League to be able to be members of the committee. And then finally, one of the discussions that we must have, and I am happy that we are having this on a platform of an organization such as yours, we need to create special funds to support young people and women who participate in elections, both for leadership in political parties and in the general election. And these funds need to be availed in good time. It is pointless for you to come 6 months to the election, then you tell us you have money to support women candidates. You won't find those women candidates. You need to support them now so that they can grow themselves, introduce themselves to the public, hone their skills, and be able to compete effectively with their male counterparts and the older generation.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Tomboya, briefly, in your perspective, what is the current political landscape enabling young people to participate effectively? I think we have lost him. All right. Mr. Tomboya? Okay. His Excellency, Honorable Musalia, in your perspective, having worked with young people, having worked in government and in the current dispensation, is the current landscape allowing for young people to participate effectively?
No, I think I had responded earlier. I remember I was the first one to touch.
All right, yeah.
I believe we need to do a lot more. This is a constituency that is untapped, a constituency that can really take Kenya to the next level. So in terms of resource allocation, policy formulation, I believe, as I said, let the young people not be handled as if it is tokenism, as if you're doling a favor. Let them be part and part of the process of taking Kenya forward. Finally, let me just thank Conrad, because this has been a very useful engagement. And I look forward to further conversation on other topical issues as and when it is possible. So I say thank you very much for getting us together. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists who are able to join us today. I want to bring in Mr. Edwin Adoga from Conrad to just give us concluding remarks. We are pleased we were able to go through the 3 topical areas of discussion. At least now we are able to weigh where we are. There's a debate between whether we have made gains or whether we are retrogressing. It seems as if we move back and forth sometimes. And so as Conrad looks to implement some of their projects, I think they will align it with the conversation we have just had. Edwin, karibu.
Thanks, Maureen, and thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. Thanks very much, Honorable Edwin Sifuna. Of course, Honorable Gladys Shule is not here at the moment, but I think she's made very interesting contributions. Dr. Tom Boyer also has been able to provide, the balance that was needed. And I think, Maureen, you've done us proud. At least, these political issues can be very emotive, but also to agree that the panelists have also been sober. I don't know why. Maybe it's because there is an intermediary or there is an independent organization. And I would like also to just mention that as a foundation, we will keep on, supporting some of these activities, some of these initiatives, and like what His Excellency Honorable Musalia Mudavadi has just mentioned. We would want to continue, making sure that we provide this space, we provide whatever, political or policy dialogue, platforms where leaders within and outside the country could meet. Because some of these things that you're discussing do cut across. It would be within the country at one point in time. The next time it's going to be something that cuts across, the borders of the country. And we would want to pick some of these things and be able to kind of, illuminate them out there in terms of meaningful discussions. Just to touch on what Honorable Sifuna mentioned, and of course, this is what we do as a foundation. So we've been carrying out political mentorship, and we will continue doing that. And we believe that for us to have, young people who are able to take over and who are able to provide meaningful political engagements at one point in time, it is also very important for them to be, mentored and for them to be taken through these steps in a way that makes also sense to them. So it is something that we are doing, and I would always be coming back to the different political parties and asking whether we could get 2, 3, or 4 boys, and girls, and help them to get to places where they want to get to. Of course, town hall debates and all these interesting impression and perspectives that you've mentioned are things that we are looking forward. And I think next year, 2021, 2022, we are going to also make sure that we are actively engaging all stakeholders, knowing that we are headed towards the electioneering period. And we have a lot of potential talents and a lot of potential gifts in the political circle. So we would want to make sure that we have these conversations together and produce whatever that we think is interesting and beautiful for this country. And I like the fact that we are all speaking on how we could bring different approaches to better the democratic space that we are in at the moment. Thanks very much, and I think we've come to the end of this, and we would be able to have more arrangements, and we'll come back to you, Waheshimiwa. One thing that I forgot to mention is that as a political foundation, of course, politics is very central to us because then we believe that it is a focal point that you can always use to determine how we move in the economic space, how we move in the social space, and so forth. So we are, of course, yes, affiliated to the CDU party of Angela Merkel, and I think many times people tend to confuse and think that CDU is cornered. No, we separate, we're independent, so we borrow from each other. Of course, we were established on the basis of the CDU party. And that means that we would be willing to connect, politicians where we need, calls with the rest of the other politicians for us to exchange ideas. And I think there's so much that you can learn from each other. So thanks very much. And I'm hoping to see you soon. And I will welcome whatever, interesting propositions that as political parties you'd want us to do together or even separately. And yes, thanks. And enjoy your time. It has been a pleasure. Asante, Nia.
Thank you.
Thank you.